This is the deconstruction and focus group for my AS Media coursework. I'm Ryan Butler. Now for the focus groups, I got a group of my friends together to help me understand what an audience likes about a radio broadcast. I picked 3 different kinds of radio sort of podcasts. The first one was BBC Kids World News. I believe it was a weekly podcast, so quite a regular thing. The comments that were made were it was dull and boring. Some said it was slightly patronising towards children and their intelligence. Also, the news topics wouldn't have been interesting to children, like murders in Zimbabwe. You can't really imagine children liking that sort of stuff. But the sound effects at the start in the jingle were good and showed that they were trying to catch the child's interest with that sort of beginning. So that sort of made me think that maybe a good beginning would give me a good show ahead. The next one was Manchester's News on the Run, more local news broadcast. The comments towards this one were also critical, as it gave too much description for a small quick news bulletin. Going down to the detail of what a woman was wearing is more suited for a newspaper article, not a radio broadcast, one of my friends said. I thought it was pretty dull, but it actually had more happening in it, unlike the BBC Kids World News, which was just dragging on and boring. The last was BBC Radio 5 Story of the Day. The comments made about this story of the day was that it was slightly too short for a main bulletin, but too long for a single story on its own. Had a good introduction with a nice friendly voice starting off the piece, but yeah, it dragged on for a solitary story. The news topic was also dull, as it wasn't attention grabbing. Moving on to my deconstruction now. For this, I picked Radio 5 Live's Football Daily and Radio 1 Scott Mills Daily. These are both podcasts from the BBC. When I watched Radio 5 Live, I found that the introduction, it had main layout of the introduction to the podcast. Presenter introduces themselves and the show. They go around the grounds to round up the Carling Cup football results from Tuesday night. Reporters at each ground round up the game, goals, send off major incidents, talking points. They have interviews with the managers or players. Then they round up the Scottish football results. Then it's a quick what's coming up over the station on the station on the next couple of days. And then the ending is how to download the podcast. Radio 1 Scott Mills Daily had a similar layout. They had an introduction to the podcast, then it advertised the station with a jingle. Presenter says an introductory statement. A tune is played. At the time it was Austin Powers theme song. The presenter and his colleagues start talking to discuss what they've done today so far. The presenter talks about an everyday segment, talks about TV and family, sends a few emails, text messages, make a few jokes, the ending of the podcast, and then it talks about other podcasts which are downloadable from the BBC. Now, having listened to both of these podcasts, I could tell that the standard radio broadcast consists of many factors to make it good. These factors depend on what type of programme it is. Like the Football Daily will naturally have more discussions than the Scott Mills Daily, because the Football Daily is more sports orientated. It's not as mainstream as Radio 1, and also people listen to it for the football. They don't listen to it for any other reason. And also the Scott Mills Daily is prime time radio show, whereas the Football Daily is a nightly show about 10:30 in the night after the day's play of football. They're both daily podcasts, like I said. If they were weekly or monthly, they would be different, I guess. They'd be going around differently, and of course they'd be very longer, but podcasts are only shorter. It sort of gives you a sort of snippet for what the show's going to be about. That's what daily podcasters are for, especially with the BBC. The Scott Mills Daily podcast discussed a limited amount of information and really only has an opening 15 minutes of the actual show. This podcast doubles up as an advert for listeners who want to listen to Scott Mills. Scott Mills adds humour to his show to be able to lighten the mood straight away. I think he does this pretty well, as ordinary working people will listen to this radio programme and they would have had a hard and stressful day at work, so would need something to relieve stress. Now, radio is a big part of the media world, most commonly used subliminally in life as a background activity and isn't concentrated on as much as it used to. When people are travelling to work in the mornings or on the tube or whatever, radio will be playing no matter where they are, what they're doing. Yeah, radio's there. People have radio as the alarm clock. If the annoying buzz annoys too much, they switch on to radio, so you get woken up by the voice of Chris Moyles in the morning, maybe. And also, radio is slightly becoming its own again. Over the past few years, there was 2 leading breakfast radio shows between Radio 1's Chris Moyles and Radio 2's Terry Wogan. It was sort of Clash of the Titans sort of stuff. You'd find that the younger sort of audience would go to Chris Moyles, whereas, without disrespecting anyone, the sort of older generation, they would listen to Terry Wogan. So yeah, that's what the radio's looking like. And the focus groups and the podcast both helped me learn that it is important for audiences when making a media product like radio, as the audience is what decides if it's good or not. I could sit here recording something thinking it's good, but if the audience at home think it's absolutely appalling, then it's not going to be a success. Thanks very much.